Hey boys and girls, I'm going to start reading our new book today. It's based on medieval times. If you met with us, which most people aren't meeting with us anymore, I wish you'd come back. On Dojo, we're meeting several times a week, and we discussed a little bit about this book. And you can go to Ducksters and look up the Middle Ages and find out what life was like back at the setting of this story, okay? It reminds me, it's called The Quest of Quentin. When I see that sword, it reminds me of, oh Lord, I can't even remember what the name of the movie is. You know, all the movies that my kids used to watch and all. The Sword and the Stone, and then Harry Potter and all that. All right, so here we go. The Quest of Quentin, The Mystery of the Golden Scroll by Brandon Keelan. Chapter 1. It does have a picture here. I'll show you right here before we get started reading. Okay. The attack on the keep. Long, long ago in a faraway land beyond the sea, a young boy was on a journey. His name was Quentin. As he walked, make sure my sound is up. As he walked through rolling hills that rested at the foot of the great mountains, he traveled with rising anticipation. He had been awaiting this day for a long time. His destination was the keep, a lone fortress at the center of the realm. 7 knights guarded this special fortress, and Quentin's father was one of them. It was extremely rare for anyone except these knights to enter the keep, and few people had ever seen what is guarded inside. But on this particular day, Quentin's father was going to take his son through the fortress's locked doors. Wow. Quentin would see for himself what lay within the keep's protection. That's Quentin. As he neared the hill on which the keep was built, he was amazed by its solid structure, topped by a high tower with narrow windows. He felt certain that nothing could ever penetrate those thick walls. He drew near the steps leading to the keep's front door, where he was met and greeted by his father. "My son, you've made it. Are you ready to behold this land's greatest and most precious treasure?" Quentin nodded excitedly, his mind swelling with anticipation. What would he find inside the keep? What was this precious treasure that must be so carefully guarded? His father turned to face the keep's door, then called out for the other 6 guardians to draw their swords. Only then did Quentin realize the keep had 7 separate doors at its massive base. 7 doors. A knight stood at each one. "This fortress cannot be unlocked," his father explained, "unless every door's key is turned at the same time." Quentin watched with admiration as his father drew his sword. The ringing of this unsheathed blade was music to Quentin's ears, though he wondered why these 7 knights, 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 had all drawn their swords. No enemies were present. As his father walked toward the keep's nearest door, Quentin's eyes were locked on the sword. Set within the steel of its blade was a narrow strip of something transparent that sparkled like diamond. This brilliant core extended from the hilt to within a hand's breadth from the blade's tip, and it appeared also in the pommel, where it gleamed beside his father's fist. Such beautiful craftsmanship left Quentin in awe. I'm going to put that up there. I don't know if you can tell much about it. Seems like the book's got a glare, but anyhow. When his father reached the door, Quentin watched him bring his sword near the door's keyhole. Not blade first, but hilt first. He saw the other knights doing the same. Quentin was thrilled by this revelation. These seven sword hilts were the actual key to the keep. Each hilt has its own unique design, his father explained, inserting his sword's hilt into the keyhole. The other knights did likewise. Then, all together, they rotated the hilts. At once, Quentin heard a deep sound coming from behind the keep's thick walls, as if several millstones had slowly begun to roll. Then came a thunderous boom, sending out a puff of dust through the slender crack at the bottom of each door. What do you think that is? Quentin's father smiled at him with a twinkle in his eyes. Let's go inside. He gripped the handle to the large door and pushed. As the door opened with a quick creak, Quentin peered inside. His father then passed through the open door. Quentin followed close behind. There are reasons we don't let many enter here, his father explained. These walls are protecting something that keeps our land in the light. If ever an agent of darkness were to enter here and steal that precious object, this land would soon fall into a great and terrible darkness. In a moment, you'll see why. Quentin followed his father down a narrow, dimly lit hall. Eventually, they came to the rotunda of the keep's great tower. There, at the room's center, was a wide stone pedestal. On it, a scroll lay open. Do you know what a scroll is? In the Bible, if you read the Bible, people used to write letters and important documents on a scroll. It's a piece of paper. It rolled from this end and it rolled from that end till it met in the middle. So you can Google an image of a scroll. Let's see, where was Okay. On it, a scroll lay open. There, his father said, our most precious treasure. It's what protects us from our enemy. Quentin couldn't hold back a soft groan of disappointment. He had hoped to see something more exciting, like a chest full of gold or precious gems. But a scroll? Why would his father call that a treasure? And how could it possibly protect the land? Maybe it's got some mystery or intrigue written on it. Quentin, this is no ordinary scroll. His father stepped nearer. Come see the writing. He followed his father for a closer look. The scroll's lettering had a golden appearance that shimmered in the light. Is it written in gold? He asked. Yes, my son. The author wrote this scroll entirely with pure gold. Wow. He designed it to reflect light. It's called the Golden Scroll. Quentin gazed at the scroll's surface, which dazzled his eyes. Yes, it was beautiful, but he had to ask, how does it protect our land? Before his father could answer, a fearful throbbing sound echoed from outside. War drums, his father said. Alarm filled his face. Quentin, hurry, follow me. They ran back down the narrow hallway and out the massive door, which his father slammed shut behind them. On surrounding hilltops, soldiers were advancing. Quentin's father quickly took a horn from his belt and blew it. Within a moment, the 6 other knights had gathered to him, all glancing anxiously toward the approaching army. It's the forces of the Dark Master, Quentin's father said soberly. They've come for the Golden Scroll. Quentin began to panic. He'd never been in a battle, and he had no weapon to defend himself. His father must have seen the growing terror on his face. Fear not, my son. The light of the scroll will protect you from these foes. He pointed toward the horizon, to the highest peak of the great mountains. Suddenly, from that summit, do you know what a summit is? The highest point of a mountain. A brilliant ray of light beamed directly toward the keep's tower. Quentin looked up to see this light passing through the tower's lofty windows. Lowering his gaze, he noticed his own misplaced shadow projecting strongly on the ground, as though a brilliant sunrise was happening right next to him. He turned toward the keep's closed door. A great brightness was spilling out from under the door. Intrigue gripped him, and he scrambled toward the door's keyhole to catch a glimpse of where this incredible light was coming from. Peering through the opening, he could see all the way down the amazing hall to a golden scroll on its pedestal. An amazing wave of brilliance reflected off the open scroll, filling the room and the hallway. Quentin found himself stunned by this glorious sight. But his amazement melted away when he heard a great war chant rising from the enemy's front lines. Their unified battle cries filled Quentin's heart with terror. "Knights of the Keep!" his father shouted. "Don't be daunted by their cries. Wait for the sound of my horn, then draw your swords for the light to shine forth. Now, to the doors!" The other knights ran back to their assigned places. Quentin had hoped to see the knights charge into battle. When they didn't, he not only was disappointed, but also began to doubt they could provide any solution to this dire situation. But then his father blew the horn, and each knight inserted his sword hilt back into the keyhole, and a piercing ray of light blazed from each blade, bursting forth upon the enemy's front lines. The invaders cowered and drew back. "Father!" Quentin cried. "The enemy can't stand against the light." He felt newly assured and excited. He had seen with his own eyes how the light of the golden scroll protected the land. However, as enemy soldiers fled from the light, they were replaced on the front lines by people in chains, who once again began to advance toward the keep. The slaves were being used as shields from the light, and thus the whole dark army began closing in again. From the expressions on the faces of his father and the other knights who had regrouped at the keep's front door, Quentin could see this was something that they hadn't expected. "How is this happening?" one of the knights asked. Quentin's father stared long and hard at the enemy before he answered. "Those on the front lines are not warriors of the Dark Master," he said gravely. "They're those people who claim to be neutral, holding neither to darkness nor to light. Because they don't hate the light, they're not afraid of it. But because they don't hate evil, evil can still use them." "Oh my goodness." "They'll soon be upon us," exclaimed another knight, much younger than the rest. "We must think of a new strategy." Quentin, in his mind, quickly agreed with this young knight's conclusion, but another knight said sharply, "No, we'll stand our ground. Those slaves can only get so close to the light before any attached darkness must flee." The knights began arguing, some wanting to stand their ground, others calling for some new and different strategy. Then the younger knight raised high his sword, which still glowed somewhat, though nothing like the brilliant shine before. "This is the only way to draw back the enemy," he declared. "We must take the light and drive them off." "Wait!" Quentin's father shouted. "It's a trap of the enemy. Don't do this." But it was too late. The young knight had already charged down the hill toward the enemy. Quentin listened as the other knights spoke urgently with one another. "What shall we do?" one asked, looking anxiously toward the charging young knight. "If his blade is captured, we won't be able to open the keep." "It's worse than that," Quentin's father said. "Whoever gains one of the 7 swords will become one of the 7 knights. We'll be bound to counsel with him in order to open the keep, and an ancient law forbids any knight from killing another." "Oh, my," Quentin's nervousness kept mounting. If the dark master could plant one of his servants at the keep, he'd have a foothold to snuff out the light of the land. "We must protect our fellow guardian," another knight shouted, charging down the hill after his younger comrade. One by one the others joined the fight until Quentin's father was the only knight left at the keep. He turned to Quentin. "This won't end well, my son. Follow me quickly." They ran to the rear side of the keep, where his father opened a secret trap door. "Climb down," he instructed. "It's a tunnel. But stay there. Stay here, just inside the door. If I'm not back for you by morning, follow the tunnel into the forest, and whatever you do, don't come back." Shaking with fear, Quentin obediently lowered himself into the hole of the damp earth and stone. When his father shut the trapdoor above him, he was left in pitch darkness. The musty smell of slime and mold filled his nostrils. As the dark silence settled upon him, his ears caught the ticking and crackle of the moving insects. Quentin could only hope his father would return quickly. Here in the darkness, he'd never know for certain when evening fell or morning arrived. Wow, this is exciting. We'll talk about it, and I'll read some more tomorrow. Have a good evening.